Okay, so I think I'm second to last after a long day, which is great. What we're going to be talking about today is something that's a bit of a unique niche in the marketing space, particularly in the branding space, and one that is so much so that here we sit in the customer engagement, brand engagement section of this, even though really this has nothing to do with customer engagement, brand engagement, but where do you put something like building the business case for brand change? So let's just spin it a little bit and say that this is really about internal engagement, internal alignment, and really driving a program through finding the funding and actually getting it done. And that's what this is really about. So I will grab my little clicker. I'll say that for us, this is particularly difficult to fit into 7 minutes because most CMOs that I talk to don't know that a company like ours or a discipline like ours even exists out there. So I'm going to focus in on some case studies and really try and force feed you as much information as I possibly can in a short period of time, and hopefully there will be 1 or 2 little nuggets that are interesting enough for you to take back that you haven't seen before. And this is really the other side of branding. This is not content marketing, this is not social media, this is not creative, it's not sexy, frankly. And so typically speaking, when I get up to talk and I talk about making a business case for change, I don't leave people excited like this. I'm really more on the spreadsheets, the 1,000-line item documentation, the CFO level conversation, the rigor that goes into really figuring out where you can find the money and actually get a project like this done. So when we deal in any branding situation, there's sort of one golden question that will kill even the best strategy that's out there. So no matter how good the research is, no matter how good the program is, particularly in energy companies where getting people to spend money on something as esoteric as brand when they're so operationally oriented, how much is it going to cost is the thing that can kill pretty much anything. So this is a question that we deal with every day, and that I'm going to sort of walk you through in a little bit of detail. And what I'm going to walk you through pretty much applies to any situation. It applies to any company. It applies whether you're going through a rebrand, a merger or acquisition, a spin-off, any sort of situation like that, or if you're not going through any sort of change and you're really just trying to improve what you're doing from a branding perspective as a company, and you can't figure out how to find the money to actually do it. There's a lot of ways to actually find that out. And so we're really going to be looking at the question of cost and opportunity analysis, the idea that you can reduce these costs, and that by reducing them and presenting CEOs and the executive teams with options, you can actually drive that change through and also get a seat at the table in ways that you might have not been before. And then also looking at finding ways to generate operational return, because if you can show that you can generate operational return year over year, you can potentially find funding to do the things that you want to do. So as I've mentioned, lots of situations that this would apply to. And in any of these situations, there's a lot of stuff out there. And with all of this stuff, whether it's the things you know about, all the marketing activities, the signs, the vehicles, the uniforms, all of this stuff, there's HR, there's legal, there's IT systems that have outputs, that have integration with third parties. All of this stuff is your brand. It is your brand representation. This is the stuff that you're looking at and you're saying, how do I get the operations to deliver on my brand promise? How do I get the operations to actually represent our brand in a consistent and strong and quality way that does actually build trust to the things that we were talking about before? And many variables go into these programs, right? I mean, there's the scope of brand change. Are we changing our identity? Are we changing our name? Are we changing our positioning, our visual system? What's going into all of that? What's the time? What's the geography, geographical scope, the quality, the asset transitions, things of that nature? All of these things can take a branding program that might cost $20 million and make it a branding program that costs $120 million to achieve basically the same objectives in a different way than you would have done it. So this is where you start playing with some interesting fun levers. And good pre-closure M&A situation. And the only reason I bring this up is because here's a situation where by doing this level of analysis, marketing, who was not at the table on the integration team, was able to get to the table on the integration team pre-deal closure by bringing these operational facts to the table and helping the integration leads that are out there doing IT and all these other things understand the marketing implications of change. And the reason that's so important is because we walk into situations all the time where a marketing organization is met with, get the brand change done in an M&A situation or a spin-off situation, and it's really like, hurry up and go. right? And they haven't had the time to think, they haven't had the time to plan, and now the organization is met with tens of millions of dollars of operational expense that all could have been rolled into the deal accounting and actually been treated significantly different to have significantly less impact on the finances of the company. So not having marketing at the table early enough in this process is fairly dangerous overall to the financials of the company. So I just bring that up. And EverSource Energy was another one where a marketer wanted to be at the table. This is sort of a rebrand situation, not an M&A situation. So an example of where you can do it. And this may not necessarily be the best branding example out there, but here's an example of a company that's, basically bleeding money. I hope there's nobody from Superior, I don't think there is. Basically bleeding money, they're losing significant amounts, they're cutting people, and yet they're able to go through a rebranding because they're doing it in such a methodical, well thought out, strategic way that they can actually drive this change through, knowing it's going to take them 5 to 7 years to reach their end objective, but they're still going to reach their end objective. So instead of sitting back because we can't afford the funding to do everything we want to do, they're driving this change through in a very efficient and economical way. I'm not going to talk about all of this by any means. Take pictures if you'd like to. There's a few things in here that I'll talk about when you're developing a budget, because this is typically the kind of thing that marketers don't really want to do, because you have a lot of words like this on there. Probably the key starting point in all of this is accurate inventorying of assets. It's amazing how many companies don't know how many locations they have, where they're doing business, how many fleet vehicles they have, what the inventory levels are of certain items, what their replacement cycles are, things of that nature. It needs to be a really good financial inventory so that you can create some scenarios. Modeling out options, I'll show you a good slide on this in a second. This modeling out options idea is the idea that if you can present some options to the board and the senior executive team, you have a much greater chance of getting one of those options accepted as opposed to just presenting one option and say, this is how much it's going to cost and will you approve it? So options is a big thing. And then leveraging things that already exist. Every organization has IT initiatives and other things that are going on. They've got normal maintenance cycles for fleet vehicles and equipment where those things come in. These are all opportunities to go ahead and actually execute rebranding. Lots of numbers on a slide, but developing comprehensive budgets and doing it in a way, these low, middle, and high scenarios could be quality. They could be degrees of brand change. They could be, are we going to do this in 3 months, or are we going to do this in 2 years or 3 years, or things of that nature. All of these things are factors that can play into this. But the whole point of all of this is that you can take all of this and recommend a hybrid scenario that shows how intelligent your strategy was, that shows how thorough you were in doing all of this, and how you've bridged the operational areas of the organization to be comprehensive. And then once you've done that and you've optimized the budget, you also then have a great chance to generate operational return. So this is the idea where by just changing the way in which you do the things that you do every day as a marketer, whether it's how you're doing agency spend, how you're doing media spend and your media buys, what you're doing with signage design, how many vendors you have at the table for every single asset area that you have. As you saw, I showed those 2 slides, and the basic point of all of that is that every single one of those assets represents an opportunity. They all have a cost, they all have a time, they all have a vendor set, and they all have an ROI. So they all have a really good opportunity to look at them differently than you've looked at them before. And all of that can then drive you to a position where you can say, yes, okay, look, here's a situation where it's going to cost us $285 million to rebrand our company. This is actually a real situation. Sorry if the numbers are frightening. But it's going to cost us $285 million to rebrand our organization over the next 5 years. But by doing things differently as an organization, what we're spending on fleet, what we're spending on signage, uniforms, badges, all of that other stuff that exists out there that marketing doesn't even necessarily know what we're spending on that stuff, right? By capturing some of that and analyzing it, we can show that you've got a payback in this stuff over, in this particular case, a 12-year period. Sometimes we show this in a 5-year period, 7-year period. It doesn't matter. The point is that you're getting some money back. And yes, there's a market opportunity as well on the upside that shows enterprise value increase, brand value increase, share of market, that kind of stuff. So that's really it. Like I said, I was going to cram a lot of information into a very short period of time, but I hope you get at least a little bit of an idea of the kind of cost analysis that you can do in a situation like this. So thank you.